The Future History of Energy and Transportation. Documenting the paradigm shift from the era of oil and internal combustion to the era of robotics. By Julian Cox. Narrated by the author with the aid of an artificial intelligence. Chapter 1. Why this book was written. There have been a great many works supporting a case for the environment and much effort expended on predicting failure modes of natural systems under the presumptive influence of global emissions. Many works too, on technological alternatives to fossil fuels, and their relative merits. Vastly more on the engineering and economic intricacies of the oil and internal combustion age, encapsulating a version of reality commonly regarded as the global economy or indeed the entire modern world. Some works have come forward on technology disruptions, in other words creative destruction that lurks at the heart of market capitalism, most famously Clayton Christensen's The Innovator's Dilemma. These hint at upsets that have been known since the dawn of industry, even of warfare to blindside experts, even the entire military-industrial complexes of empires. For the most part, these prescient works of warning have served as a pox on venture capital and business culture due to reinterpretation as instruction manuals to create problems for market incumbents, often attended by a fatal loss of focus on creating customer value. Then too come the empiricists, Clean Disruption author Tony Seba et al. Forecasters of impressive exponential projections generated by mapping past disruptions onto the cost curves of emerging technologies and business models, while invariably failing to complete an actionable understanding of market mechanisms underlying observed trends, especially trends predestined for inflection. Three of the most significant failures of empirical analysis we will address here are: 1. Oversimplification of cost versus price of electric vehicles, as a function of declining cost of batteries, sensors, compute power and general assembly with economies of scale, automation and design for manufacturing. 2. Faulty assumptions of a continuous trending decline in private vehicle ownership, in favor of fleet monopolization for consumer ride-sharing, contrary to rational and observed market behavior, given that the advent of ride-sharing as a service delivered by driverless autonomous vehicles will offer the owner a potential source of passive income. 3. Absolute failure to factor supply and demand, cash flows and accelerated depreciation of legacy fleets into the market mechanisms to arrive at market transformation, and only then, price reductions in ride-sharing on account of fully driverless vehicle autonomy, affecting the rollout of such services into a market initially dominated by manual labor, including ride-sharing fleets owned predominantly by individual drivers. As indeed are the robots, too. Correcting any one of these three modeling assumptions reveals that the future will depart radically from incumbent industry and financial market expectations, and yet at the time of writing, prevailing wisdom on all 3 points, among many others, is both contrary to the predictable future and counter-historical, for reasons that should become clear. This book in summary is a meticulous description of an economic cascade that is set to rewrite civilization. There are some realistic concerns for the upper boundary of the economy in terms of the capacity of the Earth's ecosystem to eliminate economic waste, but that simply speaks to the method of production, and the Earth alone is a constraint, not the economy. Even the most bullish financial analysis in circulation sells this reality short. The destination in terms of the power and productivity of human civilization is significantly more valuable than all of the dollars currently in circulation and greatly exceeds the global economy as it is currently understood. Of course, the same was true in reality for anyone in 1900 attempting to estimate a dollar value of 20th century technologies in the early 21st century, as a percentage of the horse and steam engine economy of the day. Naturally, the correct answer was multiples, not percentages. The root causes of exponential market disruptions are far upstream of the effects on popular culture. Popularity of a core technology is readily amenable to reverse engineering on PowerPoint. However, core technologies operating in the realm of energy and matter are rarely if ever invented because marketers gained some profound promotional insight. The market to leverage and eliminate human toil and to enhance human faculty is ever present. Fundamental inventions occur because they are possible. If one were to truly contemplate the terms telecommunications or television in the same way that operating a hydraulic excavator is telekinesis of heavy objects made practical, it ought to be obvious that a valuable market exists to extend the human faculty to telepathy, and also to telekinesis via operator-less robotics, if only it were made possible. There is a company called Neuralink working this problem in the form of a brain interface to the internet. Nevertheless, under analysis presented herein, for the most part, with some glaring exceptions, neither the projections nor the analogies chosen by empiricists are frequently found wanting. Yet getting the disruptive rationale and market mechanisms right truly matters, in order to de-risk modeling assumptions, and to game out acting upon market opportunities resolutely while upside is freshly available and while getting out of legacy tech or repurposing it while there is still time and value on the table, is still an option. Authors note, empirical analysis is prone to a cycle of awe, skepticism, time will tell, told you so you'll listen to me next time? This can serve to enhance the past track record and current reputation of a researcher. The purpose here is to serve you the reader or audience, before the crystal ball expires worthless. Without pinning down the mechanisms of radical market adoption, a shock and awe graph projecting thousands of percentage point increases in the sale of something new to the market, declaring it the next iPhone, is perhaps positive PR for that thing, but it is otherwise academic. There is nothing in empirical modeling by analogy to mitigate for the risk that those ideas selected to analogize to the iPhone or the Ford Model T are not in fact analogues of competing ideas and attempts in their day that failed on the drawing board, or in the market thereafter. What is presented herein is the difference between knowing that things will change, expanding uncertainty, to knowing how things will change, expanding mastery. In a nod to Isaac Asimov, this work seeks to do something different in the mode of the future historians. It is an exploration from first principles, adopting a technique in common with deep learning. That is, a brute force examination of everything that appears to rise to the level of statistical significance in steering the course of the future, whether suspected at the outset to be influencing outcomes, or not. Additionally, this work incorporates a variant on the theme of game theory, one could call it meme theory, notionally inspired by Asimov's psychohistory as opposed to Dawkins, Dongtum, et al. A treatment of the behavior of large populations such as financial or consumer markets over long time periods to net out granular uncertainty in regard to the direction of major events. This work also attempts the inverse of the more ordinary approach adopted in literature, that is to provide a window into the unique perspective of an expert. If all that is achieved by this work is to present a unique perspective, then this work has failed utterly. Because it describes phenomena so significant that they will dominate the experience of all who live to witness and participate in their unfolding. The scientific method defines valid experimental results as those that are reproducible independently by whichever scientist conducts the same experiment, like a recipe that reliably produces a similar cake. In the case of this thought experiment, the results are intended to be reproducible by the reader. Indeed, the reader is entreated throughout to consider, when I apply the same logic, do I arrive at the same conclusions, and was the experiment well constructed in the first place? To the extent the reader concurs that this thought experiment addresses the question of energy and transportation and that the independent results of readers match those found here, this work is very important. Whether the author or his opinion is important is not a question that is posed. Authors note, for those with an implacable need to know who they are reading, I am the son of a very senior while little-known British military-industrial physicist whose career spanned nuclear fission, lasers, fiber optics, microwave communications, missile guidance, satellite telemetry and night vision, who strayed into the humanities, perhaps due to his mother, perhaps David Attenborough Life on Earth and his brother Richard's epic film Gandhi, on a journey through mining engineering, marketing, free space infrared data networking, software project management at the dawn of the Internet, the early commercialization of lithium-ion batteries for motive power, then to stock market analysis of a single stock, TSLA. My latest project at the time of writing, in fact inspired by the process of writing this book, is solving a cost compression issue for solar and storage by developing a single electrophotochemical device. Excepting the occasional quote, not a word was written and none commissioned by a third party and none is dedicated to the cause of any individual, group or entity besides the reader and aspirationally, humanity writ large, and to my daughter. If you are curious to know what this author discovered on a journey across many industries, cultures and continents, you are essentially reading my resume. Recursively speaking, who I really am is the guy that wrote all this. This thought experiment of author and reader walks through shifts in the terrain upon which subject matter expertise must operate, in order to restore the ability to forecast. exploring beneath the level at which the world is superficially changing too fast, for traditional expertise itself to retain relevance, for a seeming lack of contiguous trend data, applicable to decisions now facing industry and investors amongst others. As such, there are many counterintuitive perspectives throughout, that if this work has succeeded, should ring true to the reader at a gut level, despite some jarring departures from conventions, norms and popularly held views on the very significant topics covered. The intention is to provide information that is objectively correct in the absence of human error and directionally correct as a minimum standard. Indeed, since the bulk of this work was researched in 2016, upon updating it in 2021, its highly controversial predictions have been borne out by events, consistently, including the announcement by Tesla of humanoid robots and importantly, why none has been countermanded by history. There are contrasting perspectives, many of them advanced on high authority and with phenomenal financial backing on both sides of various gridlock debates. Some themes are large enough to have produced a market bubble dedicated to promoting and consuming them, spanning political campaigns, protest movements and degree courses to movies and apparel. The aim therefore is not to challenge these by force of countervailing authority, which is neither assumed here nor feasible given the scope and scale of the subject matter. Instead, the aim is to contribute new perspectives whose value is in internal consistency and clear distinction from gridlock. In other words, to offer the reader an information advantage. Scattered throughout this work are paragraphs containing concepts where conclusions could not be adequately triangulated without reference to the author's opinion. Those paragraphs are marked author's note, to distinguish these and snippets of commentary in the first person from the remainder, in which the author has strived as best he may for objectivity and elimination of self from the equation, to get to a truth irrespective of passion or distaste for the answers. Should it succeed for the reader, this work seeks to develop a new reference frame, from which the future of energy and transportation becomes visible and economic opportunities actionable, whether the reader is an auto or energy industry executive, an elected official, an entrepreneur, an investor, a member of the current or future workforce, an academic, involved in media, the arts or advocacy, a customer or producer of useful energy and transportation, or simply chatting across a meal table or at a bar. Origins. This work came out of a seemingly simple task to speak at a conference in April 2016 to deliver a keynote entitled A Deep Dive About Batteries for Electric Vehicles, only to discover that it was essentially impossible. It was impossible to reach the point of telling the truth about batteries from a physics standpoint and simultaneously have it make any kind of sense to an audience more familiar with engines. Because a common framework to discuss batteries and engines didn't exist. The originally scheduled 20 minutes devolved with the good grace of organizers under the encouragement of an audience of clean tech enthusiasts and German engineers, into 2 hours of whiteboarding this issue, and incredibly, nobody left. On the contrary, many refused to leave without a handshake and a chat. Simply put, the traditional language and conceptual frameworks of internal combustion and of batteries to drive road vehicles was such worlds apart when it comes to energy, materials, labor and emissions and the value chain to market, down to the assumptions embedded in the nomenclature and units of measurement, that they refused to coexist in a sensible continuum prior to rebuilding a common reference frame. It appeared there was a clear and present appetite for such a common framework to exist in order to make sense of the potential and pathways for an engineering and market transformation from internal combustion to battery electric vehicles. Hence this work was embarked upon to run this question to ground, only to discover it connected to everything. So this book is about that, everything. The core of this issue is addressed in the chapter A Hierarchy of Efficiency. For the world to start to make sense again, this semantic tree needed to be regrown from the ground up, starting with the most basic acorn of what is energy? Then what is transportation? From there to what is efficiency? And what is the economy? Then finally to the why and wherefore of what to expect in terms of technological and market outcomes. It isn't particularly troublesome to describe a traction battery, although there is much more to it than is commonly appreciated. Rather, to deliver a genuine understanding to replace confusion that fans out from a notion of batteries and motors as analogs of fuel tanks and engines, something that from a physics perspective is simply not true. A deep dive about batteries that is actually true and, it is to be hoped, makes sense at the same time, is to be found as one of the concluding chapters. To reach a deep dive about batteries, and in retrospect, In order to guarantee that there is something here to disturb everyone, this is by necessity a journey of exploration that touches upon economics, politics, warfare, poverty, physics, chemistry, biology, automation, the Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, religion, life, death and taxes. Even that most polarizing of topics, that declaring it polarizing, or not, is itself polarizing, climate change. There is only one guiding principle. That is to define good in terms of the good of humanity and peace, prosperity and individual liberty alongside an abundance of natural biodiversity to wonder at. No austerity measures, compulsory public transport and pedal cycles and no bids to save the planet by means of radical human depopulation is advocated for. Those ideas are assumed to be unimaginative at best. Filed under bad. Moreover, they are highly improbable to succeed as manifest outcomes. Looking back from 1,000 years in the future to the past 10 or 20 decades, it will become clear in the course of reading this work, that the leap from horses to internal combustion will find its proper context as one of the first small steps in the evolution of technologically advanced civilization. The next step that is now upon us is a far more significant upgrade, than was the case from horses to internal combustion. Decidedly not a descent into austerity. That is, assuming mismanagement of such a transformation in the way work is derived from machines, the very basis of the US dollar reserve currency, the global economy and consequently the basis of the balance of world power, does not give rise to an all-encompassing global conflict. This work was written as an aid to more and better anticipation, less confusion, less finding oneself bereft on the wrong side of history when anticipating a career choice, anticipating the markets, future-proofing a retirement fund and anticipating broad customer market needs across industry. Any assistance in that direction would seem to put a thumb on the scale for general prosperity and world peace. Unlike previous paradigm shifts in the core technologies that power human civilization, there appears to be an available path to arrive at the next iteration, the era of robotics described herein, via energy and industrial independence as opposed to a land grab. More precisely via net productivity of the world's major economic powers, especially the USA. The alternatives such as seeking to prolong the post-World War II oil-centric order while China achieves a destabilizing zero-sum strategic advantage in electrification, robotics and strategic independence from US dollar-regulated oil imports, or to seek the destruction of the fossil fuel economy by government fiat, even with renewables, but out of sequence with achieving US net productivity, do not appear under analysis to be equally promising. The optimum geopolitical outcome identified herein does not feature in political rhetoric nor public discourse at all. It probably should because it is supportable by many that are functionally opposed to good outcomes, in error, as well as many engaged in intellectual conflict at a meaningless tangent to any outcome. Yet at the time of writing, the optimum outcome appears to be unfolding satisfactorily regardless, although it is statistically on a knife edge. For those familiar with Asimov, this would appear to be our Selden crisis and countervailing forces set against humanity, all mule. Despite some novel warnings in relation to hydrogen and the misapplication of autonomy, the overarching rationale for optimism for the future is more powerful, quite literally by the terawatt and exaflop, than fear and concern. So, here it is. A unified theory of a field that is at its essence, the basis of human civilization, just to describe a car battery. Welcome to the future history of energy and transportation. For world peace. Julian Cox.